Hello and welcome to the TGH College Hardwood Podcast. I'm Joe. With me is Greg, as always, here to recap a week of college basketball, preview the next week of college basketball. We're getting into the I guess we'll compare it to the dog days of summer with baseball, but just basketball. We're getting into the midseason right before conference play starts. There's not a lot of games. Last week was finals week. This upcoming week has Christmas week. Just means that there's less games being played, but we're still going to do our best to talk about some of the big games that are happening because they have been a couple notable ones. Greg, how are you doing?
Great, Joe. I think it took you 8 episodes, but you pronounced the podcast name right. So we want to give props, give shouts to that. It's a mouthful. Some idiot came up with the name, so we don't need to talk about who it was. But I'm just glad we finally got it right.
I need to have it in front of me too so I can read it. I can't even say it without having reading it either. So, yeah, it's a tough podcast, and we're gonna try to keep on pronouncing it right. Some things before we get started. Rondo is going to be making an appearance here too. I think my roommate will be getting back from the store here any minute, and Rondo's going to go nuts. So just get ready for his opinions on this week of college basketball. But also, we talked about it last week, Greg. There weren't a lot of good games, especially early in the week. So we're going to fast forward to Wednesday. We're going to start doing this more chronologically moving forward. Figure it's easier for people to travel with us as we go through it, and I have to talk about two different things at two different times. So let's start it off with one of the funniest upsets I think I can remember happening. Chicago State 75, Northwestern 73. Notable because Chicago State is one of the teams that is always one of the worst in college basketball, Division One. Mark Titus on his podcast always jokes about taking the Chicago State job. And Northwestern had just gotten into the top 25, and what do? They lose to Chicago State, a team that they should be beating by 20 to 30 points at a minimum. It just goes to show you how crazy this college basketball season is, where this upset happens to a ranked team. Boo Buie did have 23 points, didn't end up mattering. He's still a very good player. Northwestern has a lot in front of him, but man, we're not expecting that one.
Yeah, this is one I did not see coming, and it comes right off the tail of Northwestern having beaten Purdue. So, not your best look for the Big Ten, and not your best look for Purdue when a team that just took you down literally within less than a week goes and loses to Chicago State, who, as Joe already mentioned, perennially just one of the more atrocious programs. And obviously maybe they're putting a little something together. They got this win. It's got to be one of that's. I mean, at that point, it's got to be a program staple. I believe I had heard somewhere they've never beaten it, which would be expected. They'd never beaten a top 25 team. This is their first win over, I believe, a power conference team as well. So props to them, but not a good look for Northwestern, a school that has historically struggled to make the tournament. I think only made it once or twice at all. They were one of the last teams that I can think of that were in a power conference that hadn't made the tournament. So, a feel good story. And now, it looks like they're putting something together this year, and you have this loss. I mean, this is horrible for a resume. Joe, I was actually I was going to trivia time you. I was gonna ask you off the top of your head what Chicago State's net was, but when I'm actually on my phone searching for it, it won't even pop. It must be so low that it won't even pop up.
Yeah,
So if you have it and you wanna ask me, I don't know it yet.
I don't have it yet. I can look it up while we're talking. But yeah, you're right. It's a crazy loss. It makes
I'm pulling it
okay.
up.
You pull it up. But crazy loss for them. And
I got it.
okay, go ahead.
Okay. All right. So what do you think it is?
Their net now is
What do
updated
you
for
what do you think
today.
it is? Just off the top of your head. There's 362. Yes.
I think they probably moved
Yep.
up from 360 to 315.
They're 303 right now.
Oh boy, big win. Okay, well that's a big win for them, their program, and again they're the butt of some jokes from some other podcasts, and good for them to get that win. Northwestern, like I said though before, lot to play ahead of them. They have some good players, and it just seems like this is happening in college basketball to everyone this season. So we'll keep the theme going here. We have Arkansas State beating Louisville. Now, to me, Greg, this isn't the full story of what's going on here. We have rampant rumors of Kenny Payne being fired as early as, tomorrow, whatever that might be, the next couple of days. Now it's being reported he's at least going to coach through the Kentucky game. I don't know how that helps, but they had, players that may be on the team, may not be on the team, or in the transfer portal or not in the transfer portal. There's a lot of rumors that I probably, like whether this player got into a fight. He with Kenny Payne. There's also talk about no other high major Division One programs recruiting. This player. I think this is like on top, the cherry on top of the cake of what has been a disaster at Louisville. This game in particular was bad too. That player was in the stands, and I'm not using said player's name. I guess maybe I should, but I just don't want to, like, allegedly all these things are happening. I don't want to put anything on anyone here. But it's just been a total mismanagement by Kenny Payne here, and this is just kind of the thing that's going on top of it, where this player was at the women's game that was happening before this, and then he stayed for the game and actually watched the Arkansas State game after he had been dismissed from the team. And this is after Louisville said, no, he entered the transfer portal, so they corrected themselves. No, we actually kicked him off the team. We were trying to be nice about it. Not quite sure the last time I heard a story like this for a program going on.
I just think in terms of optics, like, you're more inclined to say, okay, the school, they were trying to be nice, and say, with everything that's going on with this program right now, when I see a kid that chooses to sit in the stands and watch his former teammates, I'm without having any details whatsoever of what actually happened, like, my gut inclination is to believe the player. Just the optics of that this looks to me, and we could obviously find out that there's something that happened, but I'm just saying, gut reaction, to me, it looks like someone who does care about the program. You know what I mean? Like, and it fits with everything else we've heard about Louisville this year. Joe, I don't even think we mentioned on the podcast, there was a player who didn't want to play in the first half of the game because didn't have the right tights or whatever. And that is something that Kenny Payne said in a press conference post game. The funny thing is this whole step away from Pitino, and obviously there was Chris Mack in between. We've been trying to get away from this guy that was hit for lack of institutional control. You want to talk about lack of control? Here's what it looks like. Now, obviously, I'm playing on words. This is all completely different, but like, this dude has no control over this program. It is a runaway freight train going down the wrong way down the tracks. This just, I heard someone say this week that, people said it would have been bad to fire him after 1 year. And now people are saying maybe that would have been like the good thing to, like, maybe that would have saved both him and the school the embarrassment that they're going through this year. Joe, I just like, I don't know why you'd want him to keep coaching at this point, unless it's just they know they're going to get smoked by Kentucky. So you just keep him as the coach. So that goes on his tenure. I don't know. Like, if you already know you're getting rid of him, like, I don't know what the point is.
Yeah, it's been a mess of a job overall too. Like, it was not in a good spot. Rick Pitino leaves. Chris Mack comes in and has some nice times. I mean, there was a point where I think they were ranked top 10 in the country under Chris Mack too. And then things start to fall apart. I thought they maybe got rid of him prematurely, but you also had all the FBI stuff going on with him. And then you get Kenny Payne in there, like a total fresh start after the blackmail and the FBI and everything. And it didn't work out. And I think now it's time for a new fresh start. This is a top 10 college basketball job. A top 10 college basketball history as well. That doesn't always match up, but they have the resources. They have the big name. They've won in the past. They can recruit to the state. Obviously, Kentucky's doing a good job of that. This is a premier program that is this is the worst I think I've ever seen a premier program go. We can make jokes about, like, Kentucky had that one bad year in 2020, and Duke did too. Indiana hasn't done anything of relevance in the last how many years, but like, it hasn't been this bad. This is extremely bad for a program that has all these resources. I would think that maybe they're going to fire him after the Kentucky game, maybe after like the first semester is official, maybe like before the second semester gets started. I don't know. It should be coming soon. They have too much history, too many resources to be losing like this and to be having this type of stuff go on. There's definitely things behind the scenes that happen at every program where, like, maybe a player doesn't fit or like gets in a fight with other players and has to be kicked off or dismissed. But it just seems like it's, with everything else going on, it just makes it seem like it's not a great situation. And that's kind of pretty apparent by the results. Next one up we have on last Wednesday, Greg, we had UNLV beating Creighton 79-64. Now, this is not a very good UNLV team. They are 4-5 on the season. They've played some good teams, but they've also lost some teams that they probably aren't going to be very good this year. Mountain West is probably tough for them. This to me, Greg, says more about Creighton's lack of depth. We talked maybe about Gonzaga a lot last week with their lack of depth, and we'll talk about them coming up here too. But when Trey Alexander has a bad game, this is what's going to happen. This is what every Creighton fan on Twitter is saying. This is exactly what it kind of looked like to me when going back and rewatching this game. 2 of 13 shooting overall from your best perimeter player. You can't get that if you're Creighton and don't have much on the bench.
Yeah, Joe, for those keeping score, this is Mountain West 2, Creighton 0, because if you recall, Colorado State actually obliterated Creighton earlier in the year. So not a good look for Creighton. This is a team that we had been looking at as possible national championship contenders. And you already said it, Joe. Like, this is not a great unit. I mean, there's pieces. Like, one interesting thing with that whole, and we don't need to get into this now, I'm sure everybody's read about it, but with the whole second year transfers getting in and starting to play. One of the Boone brothers that used to be at Oklahoma State now played in this game. There's some pieces on this team. They have, I think the kid's name is Data and Thomas, 4 or 5 star recruit. There's pieces of this team. There's things to like about, Kruger's son is the coach. You're just looking at this roster. I mean, it looks like your typical Mountain West roster. I mean, a middle of the pack team in terms of the country. This is not a loss that we should be seeing from Creighton, though. I mean, this spells danger for a team that we could definitely have seen, a couple weeks ago, be one of our national title contenders. And it's just now we got to take a step back with them. And it just goes back to that, what we had before. It's going to make us wonder what Ryan Nemhard still being at this program might mean. And Stephen Ashworth is a fine player. Me, Joe, I'm a Mountain West fan. I'm happy he came out and they got a decent player. But I mean, I'm sure Gonzaga's glad to have him. But you're right, and I've been saying it. I didn't catch all that. I turned this game on, late, but it just seems like Kalkbrenner's not touching the ball a lot. They're relying on jump shots, and that's fine when you're hitting them. That's also what makes them a very dangerous team. Because if you get into a game and they're hitting 35, 40, 45% of their jump shots, you're not winning that game. They have the ability to just plain outshoot you. Look at the Nebraska game. Nebraska gave them nothing inside, and they blew them out of the water because they do have the capacity to shoot very well. But jump shooting teams, they can have games sometimes. And I just think they just need to start going inside a little bit more. Kalkbrenner, I mean, we had him on our list of, possible preseason All-American, and it just seems like they're underutilizing him right now. And that makes them almost a one-dimensional team at times. So
I'm with you. It makes no sense when you have a mismatch in the post in probably 90% of their games this year. Kalkbrenner will be better than the player that is guarding him. Play through him and then kick it out to those jump shooters, get some more open looks is kind of what I took away as well. Again, everyone's having these losses, so it's not a total indictment on them, but there are things that you can see from this where if they lose in March, it's probably going to be because they take too many jump shots. They don't have a bunch of depth on the perimeter, and they don't get the ball into Kalkbrenner. So just some themes we're noticing early. And like we said before, this is the portion of the season where we're starting to see what teams are. And Greg, we're seeing this college basketball season's already been pretty crazy with the upsets. I would say arguably more than I've ever seen in a season up to this point. And what I hope happens is that it's upsets all the way through March, right? But what I don't want to happen is hey, maybe UConn, Purdue, and Arizona just run through the tournament at the end of the year. Because that's certainly possible as well, where it's 3 elite teams or 4 elite teams, and then everyone else in the tournament's kind of boring. But I hope it's the other way. I think we're going to get more of the other thing just by the way teams have played this year.
Well, you said that, Joe, but even UConn's not invincible because they have a loss to Kansas on there. So I think it's going to be a lot of these things that you're gonna point and connect these dots, but then there's going to be another line you cross where you're like, well, that doesn't make sense. And we're going to talk about this in a little bit with some of the other games that happened, Friday and Saturday. But there's some things that some teams are. You're right. They're starting to find water. We're starting to figure out who they are, and then there's some that just don't know what to do with. It would just be easier if they would just let us know who they are and stay like that, because then we could do our job as analysts and tell you what they are. But if they don't even know what they are, I don't know what we're supposed to do.
I couldn't tell you either, and you're right. The allowing of transfers midway through the season, like the NCAA has done, has just complicated it for us, but that'll make it more fun in March as well. We mentioned UConn, Greg. UConn had a big game on Friday in Seattle against Gonzaga. They win 76 to 63. This was pretty much domination from the start. Donovan Clingan had a big game, 21 points, 8 rebounds, his best game of the season. Greg, me and you had talked about how he had not played up to his level, but he was injured. And I think he was mismatched in this game. Gonzaga doesn't have the biggest big guys in the world. They're 6'9" and 6'10", and not the greatest at post defense as well. But UConn really just flexed their strength here. I think they can win in multiple types of ways. That's what we like to see from teams who can win in these games. They got Castle back in this game as well. Was clearly not totally himself quite yet, but they all honestly didn't need him to be yet. So a team that, again, early on we talked about last week being one of those teams that we were very impressed with. And Gonzaga, their issues are very apparent where their lack of depth is just going to kill them this year if they don't figure that out.
Yeah, forget just the lack of depth that we've already talked about, Joe. Joe did text me before this game. He said, "Hey, there's a height mismatch. If you see Clingan go off, just put this as a mental note that it might be why. It might just be a good matchup for him." So Clingan's definitely a guy to keep an eye on because we had already said, "Hey, this UConn team is already rolling." And if this guy that we were told could be, the second coming of Adama Sanogo for them this year or this year's, however you want to word it, then this team's going to be unstoppable. So if he's finally filling in, then they look great. The thing with Gonzaga and the opposite, you already hit it, but I mean Graham Ike only played 18 minutes, and I know there was a height mismatch. So my only thought is few thought he was just such a liability defensively. He couldn't have him out there because I mean that's what he's there for. He's there to get him buckets in close, and if he can't get buckets over Clingan, there's no point in having him in. But this is a team we're talking about that's already got a rotation of only like 7 guys, and now you're taking one of them, and he's only playing 18 minutes. So yeah, I mean, this team, no one came into this season saying Gonzaga was a national title contender. We all knew they lost a lot, and it's great that they got Ryan Nembhard and stuff, but there's not a lot to work with here, and we have to put this in context. There's not a lot to work with here from the context of what we're used to Gonzaga being national title contender the last, what feels like decade, one of the elite teams, but they've also had, it almost feels like maybe they have a little bit of an identity crisis, not sure what they want to be. I mean, I know they want to get out and run, and UConn just said, no, we like playing half-court game. Yes, that's the way we're going to control this game. That's how this game is going to be played. But, it's kind of a bummer to see a Gonzaga team like this. I haven't looked at who they might have coming in next year, and obviously few used the transfer portal a little bit to get Graham Ike and Ryan Nembhard. So, I mean, there's hope. Maybe he's going to adapt and start looking to build teams different ways. But it's everybody I feel like is, I mean, I don't want to say everybody, but a lot of people have felt good about Gonzaga, smaller school, smaller conference, always, fights with the big guys. And I don't know about you, Joe, but I'm sick and tired of hearing this. They they won't ever. I'm ready for them to just get their title so everybody can shut up. And I would rather it not be in a year where we had like the COVID stuff going on and the tournament was played all in Indianapolis, so we don't get any asterisks or any excuses. I know we're obviously we're big J journalists and we shouldn't be rooting for anybody, but that's one thing, man. I can't get behind this whole just because they haven't done it means they won't ever. And I mean, it looks like to me this year there's not really a shot for them. I mean, they could. It would be nice to see them keep. I know they got a streak of Sweet 16s going on. It would be nice to see them keep that going. Maybe, I don't know. I don't think this is a second weekend team. They're good, just not. It's weird to say, but they're not Gonzaga good. They got good pieces, just not. There's not enough of them.
Yeah, to me, this is a team that I think the talk about their conference is overblown. Especially the WCC has had some other solid teams. Just people who don't follow college basketball wouldn't know that. But I do think this year they're off the table, to be honest. Their resume will not get them a great seed. They'll have to go on one of the runs that they used to do when they were the underdogs way back when, instead of now where they're a team that is a team that always is in the Sweet 16s and farther on in the tournament. Just that to me, it's just clearly the lack of depth is just the reason. If they had like one or two other guards they can maybe count on and maybe another consistent big guy or a rim protecting big guy, maybe that changes things. But you're right, they have to maybe change the style of play. Their goal this season should be win the WCC and just kind of let the chips fall where they may in the NCAA Sonic tournament, play with house money. But they also, I'll bring this up, Greg, because college basketball is rarely in national headlines before March, really. I mean, people tend to forget about it, and that's not cool because there's some good stuff going on early in the season. But, Sydney Sweeney was it Jimmy Fallon, and Gonzaga signed to team basketball for Jimmy Fallon because he's from Seattle. Gotta wonder what the motivations are there, Greg. She said that's one of the players slid into the DMs. Are they focused?
Yeah, that sounds like bulletin board. I think what it is because she was. I did read up on this because I was like, where did this come from? I guess she was born in Spokane. Mm-hmm. Here's what it is, Joe. She's trying to give Mark Few bulletin board material. She said, if I make this a story, then he's going to be able to put something up on the board and say, look, you guys aren't focused. Look what's going on. I don't know which one of you it was, but you're all punished for it. We win as a team, we lose. I'm telling you. That's what's going on here.
The funny part is there are two players on Gonzaga's team. I read a story by, I think, Grayson Weir of Bro Bible, of course, who said there's two players who follow her on Instagram. So obviously, if you follow her, you're more likely to be the one sending the message. It is Anton Watson, who's playing very
a good game.
Very well this year. Their leading scorer, scored 20 points in this one. Or it's backup big guy, Ben Gregg, who's more of an effort guy. So either one, that's a funny story. I hope we get to the bottom of it more than just those two guys. But pretty cool when the Hollywood heartthrob is shouting out Gonzaga basketball early in the season, even if they are struggling by their own standards. But yeah, there's still a lot of season left. Crazy things are happening. Maybe they get a 7 or 8 seed, and they go on a run.
So, Joe, does she have potential to become college basketball's Taylor Swift for March Madness if Gonzaga goes on what would this year be a Cinderella run even for them?
Yeah, I think she does. I think she just has to end up going to the games and creating an impact. I mean, think about it this way. I mean, I think Taylor Swift is just this year's NFL's Sister Jean.
That's a good point. That's a great point.
Sister Jean was getting all the headlines before Taylor Swift did. So anyway, UConn gets the win there. Funny little story on the end there, but UConn gets the win. Gonzaga has some things to clean up. UConn looks like they almost have nothing to clean up moving forward and heading into the Big East, but they were good outside of the Big East last year, and then the Big East gave them some trouble, so we'll see what happens there. Let's move on to Saturday games, Greg. We had some surprising results, not in that, hey, the preseason we would have said, oh, that makes sense, but now maybe not. Michigan State beats Baylor 88-64. This game was over within minutes. Like, never say never for a comeback, but Michigan State was up 45-17 at the half. This is, to me, Michigan State starting to figure things out, but Baylor, a lot of headlines this year about, and last year too, Jerome Tang leaves the coaching staff. He's now at Kansas State, and their defense the last 2 years has been pretty bad. So it's not as direct of a impact as maybe a defensive coordinator in football has on a defense, but losing assistants and maybe you're losing the type of players that you recruit is you can't give up 88 points to Michigan State, who struggled to score against everyone, including Nebraska last week. So I don't know what your take is, but I'm still not ready to buy in fully to Michigan State. There's still the Izzo in the back of my head where I'm like, they might figure it out, but I'm not sure this is the game that really proves it.
Well, Joe, we've been saying this all year. If anything, if the coach's name was anything other than Tom Izzo, this team would have been written off for us. Even with this game, we would just say it's a blip on the radar. Everybody gets one. That's, but you just never know with Michigan State because they got Izzo at the helm. They might figure it out, but they also shot 63% from the field. I don't think they're going to do that for the rest of the year. It's a nice win for them. They are going to need some resume builders if they want to have, a chance of making an at-large and where they don't have to. No, they're gonna get chances. It's. I guess this game tells you that there's something in there that can be molded. You don't beat a team this bad, a team like that this bad, and you're just junk. I mean, there's something there. I mean, everybody saw it in the preseason. Obviously, they sputtered. They got out to one of the worst starts historically for a top 5 school. But I'm with you. I'm still wary. This is a team that they fooled me. They fooled me once. Shame on me. I wanted them. I liked them preseason, but we'll just keep an eye. I don't know what they have coming up. Obviously, we're really around this corner from Big Ten play, if anything. They got a couple of. They are playing in a couple of the New Year's Eve week, the 30th. They are playing Indiana State, who, for anybody that doesn't know, as far as I know, they're still undefeated, are they not? Or no, they've dropped one game. But I keep hearing people all over talk about this Indiana State team, and Indiana State's only losses to Alabama. So that might be a game worth watching. It could actually be a decent resume type game, but Michigan State's got Oakland this week, Joe. We already know Oakland beat Xavier. That's not a gimme, especially for this team. So I don't want to get fooled again, but I don't know, man. I'm with you. I mean, Xavier Booker's still only playing 8 minutes. A lot of what we were sold on is, hey, they're bringing back Tyson Walker, they're bringing back Hogarth, they're bringing back Jaden Akins, but I think you said either in our last podcast or podcast before this, just there's not that consistent offense. Like when we look at Kansas and teams like that, we're like, man, it's just 3 guys, and like, you got to worry about that. Or we look at Gonzaga, we're like, man, it's just a couple of guys. We look at Michigan State, we're like, we don't know who it's going to be from one game to the next. And like, if you're not, don't get me wrong, like it's fine for some of your stars to have off nights, and that's when your role players are supposed to pick it up and have their better games. When you got a team like this that you're like, I really don't know where it's coming from any given night, and you're just playing the lottery at that point, hoping somebody, picks them up. So we'll see. Big Ten play, it's going to be long. It's going to be grueling. Maybe it'll mold some of these freshmen. Maybe they'll have, kind of the opposite thread that Purdue did last year, where their freshmen kind of just tailed off. Maybe this whole non-conference schedule has been a building process for them. Maybe, but I'm with you. I am not sold, because we've got enough of a sample size for me to say, hey, this is a great win, but you show me something else, and then we'll start looking at you and talking about you.
Yeah, and we don't know that much about Baylor still, right? So they played some games that, like, I think they scheduled them with good intentions, but they beat Auburn early. We still don't know what Auburn is. They got a decent win against USC today that we'll talk about for a second here. But we have, Oregon State they scheduled. I mean, power conference team. Florida, Seton Hall. Not really moving the needle in terms of, like, big wins yet. So we'll see what they can do. We'll see what Michigan State can do starting with that Big Ten play. And what is that, the 40th anniversary of they're playing Indiana State because it's the 40th anniversary of that season, 45th anniversary?
That didn't even so 79, right?
Yeah,
79.
So math right on that one, 45, 55?
30, 40, yeah, something like that.
Okay,
right.
Cool. We don't do math, but that's pretty cool to have that game scheduled. Let's talk about Kansas and Indiana. Now, this was a game Kansas was favored by, I think, like 7.5. But it looked like Indiana was going to win this game for most of it. A lot of the problems we had with Kansas were coming to fruition. Guys in foul trouble. McCullough was in foul trouble. Dickinson wasn't having his best game. He did finish with 17 points, 14 rebounds. But they didn't know where they were getting the points from. And Indiana kind of just choked the lead away down the stretch. Now, for me, we're not big on moral victories here. But I thought Indiana looked like a team that everything was starting to come together in a good way before they choked the lead away. And that's like good news heading into Big Ten play where there's a lot of unknowns going on in the Big Ten. But Kansas gets the win. They're finding ways to win. And I don't know, again, what the ceiling is for this team, but I do know going into Indiana and getting this win is very, very tough to do a lot of times. And it looks like Indiana might figure some things out down the road.
Yeah, one important note. I don't think you mentioned this, Joe. No Xavier Johnson for Indiana. Gabe Cupps, a freshman, actually from out here by us. He went to, and now I'm blanking on it. My brother-in-law Cameron's going to kill me. Did he go to Centerville? He went to one of the schools around us here in Dayton. I think it might have been Centerville. So local kid starts the game running the point for them. Didn't really, I mean, like stat wise, doesn't look like he had too much of an impact on the game. Trey Galloway was their leading scorer. I feel like I've watched him at Indiana at this point for like 4 years now, and I don't actually know what year he is, but it feels like he's been there for forever. It says he's a senior. I don't know, man. Like this team was built as, okay, they got Mackenzie Mbako coming in. He defected from Duke to go to Indiana once Filipowski said he was coming back. They got Kelly Ware, who transferred from Oregon. Malik Renew, I actually liked a lot of what I saw him last year playing. I thought I believe he's a 4 or 5 star, and this is his sophomore year. I did like a lot of what I saw from him. There's some pieces to this team. I definitely didn't have this on my radar, and that's why we're talking about it. I didn't have this on my radar as a game I thought was going to be close. Sure, it was at Indiana. It's in Bloomington. You know, anything can happen in that building. It kind of has, when you watch that stadium on TV, it kind of has that Duke feel to it, where the fans feel like they're really close to the floor, and that can just get intimidating sometimes. So, but here's the thing. I mean, this is the same Kansas team we've kind of seen all year. It's Hunter Dickinson, it's KJ Adams, it's Kevin McCullough, and a little bit of DeJuan Harris, and like that's it. Like that's what they got. And like if those guys are all kicking, that's that. I mean, that starting lineup is like I guess enough to get them deep in the tournament. But we just talked about this with some other teams. One of those guys is going to have an off night, and there's just no role players that I've seen yet that are telling me, hey, when one of these guys has an off night, you know, this person's going to step up. And I think we already talked about it in a previous podcast. I think that's what they thought Nick Timberlake might have been, the transfer from Towson. It just seems like there's maybe some pieces here that didn't work out to be quite what they thought. Elmarco Jackson's only averaging 6 points a game. You know, props to him for being a freshman in the starting lineup at Kansas, but there's just, to me, this is a fine win. You know, I don't know what Indiana. I'm not looking at the net right now. I don't know what their net is, but I would assume it's going to be a quad 1, quad 2 win, regardless of whether it is now or not. Just Indiana's just their schedule is going to be packed with other Big Ten teams, so it's going to be a good win for Kansas. But we just keep having the same story with Kansas, where you know you get into the tournament and one of these guys, you know, God forbid, gets injured or has an off night. They're in trouble because you're not winning this. You're not winning the tournament. And we're talking about this in the context of winning the whole thing. This is a team that's been ranked basically in the top 5 for, you know, top 3 all year, talked about as a possible national championship contender. If you're a small school, you know, we've seen Oral Roberts do in the past where they only got 2 guys, you know, it was A. Smith and Kevin O'Banner. That's enough to win you a game or 2 here in the tournament. Be a cool story. We're talking about this team in the context of, can they win a national title? You're not winning a national title with just 2 or 3 solid pieces. You need more than that. And there's still time for some of these guys to come into their own. I just haven't seen anything yet. There's not even been one of those performances that I can think of where it was like, man, this guy came off the bench and had 15. I haven't seen anything this year. And again, I think they were hoping maybe Nick Timberlake would be something. So, Joe, I mean, like, it's weird to say you're concerned about a top 5 team that, you know, has 1 loss, but like, if we're going to talk about them winning the national championship, like, they are flawed. They're not seriously flawed, but they're flawed.
Now, this is going to backfire on me in a pretty big way, but I'm actually here for it if it does, because it would make March pretty interesting. I feel like we know, and more than any year, I think we know what teams we might pick to win the national title and what teams we're avoiding to win the national title. But everyone's getting these upsets and everything, and it's really crazy still all the same. So, like, I know I'm not taking Kansas to win because of those issues, right? If it's one bad game from Dickinson, McCullers in foul trouble, what could they lose a game to a team like Indiana who may not make the tournament this year? I mean, maybe. Yeah, that could definitely happen. Gonzaga, we already talked about their depth issues. Like, there's a lot of things we are figuring out with this team. I don't think it's overreaction at all to say, hey, I have some concerns with Kansas. They're not shooting 3 as well as maybe they would want. They're relying on too few guys, or relying too much on so few guys, I guess is the better way to put that. It's definitely a concern, and with all these teams, it just, with the transfer portal era, it's very inexcusable to have depth issues unless it's injury prone something, you know. And Kansas doesn't have that many issues with the injuries as much as they just didn't go build the roster out in a different way. And I guess, like you said, Timberlake supposed to be a shooter and help them out, but he has not been as impactful as maybe they would have hoped. So we'll see how they do down the stretch. I still would not, you know, they're Kansas, just like with the Michigan State and Izzo in the back of your head. It's still Bill Self. It's still Kansas. They'll probably win the Big 12, but definitely some concerns in terms of national title contention. But it's hard to win as titles is in the last couple of years. A lot of teams need to reload a couple of years down the line after winning one, and that's what Kansas might have to do after winning a couple of years ago. Houston beat Texas A&M 70-66. Now, there's a couple notes that we have to get into with this one before we really, I guess, talk about things. Terrence Arsenault gets injured, serious injury, going to be out for the season. That's huge for, like we were just talking about with other teams. Houston is not deep. They starting lineup scores a lot of points. Arsenault was a key bench piece. That is going to be killer for their tournament run, possibly. We'll see if they can handle that. Texas A&M, Wade Taylor had 34 points. No one else on Texas A&M had more than 7. Now, and the other thing is Tyrese Radford was out in this game for Texas A&M, so I actually thought it was a good performance, despite the fact that Wade Taylor was the only one providing anything. It's just they were at full strength still, and it's going to be tough to win games when they don't have. Talking about a team that's relying on just 2 or 3 players. Texas A&M has been that. We've talked about that, and at the same time, because they're not ranked very highly, it's not as big of a concern as it is for someone we're talking in the national title contention sphere.
This is the case study of what we say when we're worried about just take Kansas or whatever team. Because right now, Texas A&M is playing without Tyrese Radford. This is what we're talking about when a team is missing just even one guy. And, like, it's fine. You know, we even say it. Hey, your role players need to step up. But this is how you lose a game here or there, and especially in a single elimination tournament. This is how you get knocked out in the first weekend or the round of 32 or whatever. I mean, Texas A&M, they're doing their best. They're still putting up good performances. You know, their losses are to Houston, FAU, Virginia, and Memphis. Like, none of those, and most of those have been without Tyrese Radford. None of those scream at me and say, you know, oh my goodness, you know, like this team isn't what we thought it was going to be. Well, no, they're just not healthy right now. They're still, even not healthy, they're still hanging with one of the best teams in the country. I mean, I don't know what else you can ask for a team that's not playing at 100%. I wasn't high on this team coming into the season. You definitely talked me into this team. We went and saw this team play at Ohio State. You know, there's a couple of good pieces on this team. Hopefully they get Tyrese Radford back soon. They're in the Big I almost said they're in the Big 12. Man, I'm about 15 years off. They're in the SEC. There's going to be quality chances for wins. I'm not concerned about this team making the tournament. I, in fact, am of the opposite opinion, and I would imagine you probably feel the same. This is a team that I could think could be a dangerous 7, 8, 9, 10 seed, whatever it ends up being. It's just going to depend on how healthy they stay. But this is not a team that if I was a 2 seed or a 3 seed that I'd want to see, you know, playing in that 8, 9 or 7, 10 game. And then all of a sudden I got to play them in the round of 32. This is not the team I want to play. And I know at one point, Joe, I texted you because the game wasn't over yet, but Wade Taylor had 34 points on 50% shooting. It wasn't just 34 points and guy was just volume shooter. Just, you know, he was the only one. He was efficient. So
Yeah.
there is definitely opportunity for this team. Again, maybe it's just I didn't watch enough of this team last year, but coming into the year, I was like, I don't know. I don't get it. Like, Joe, why is Wade Taylor on all these preseason All-American? I don't get it. And he this weekend, even though they lost, said, hey, Greg, you remember what you said in the preseason that you just weren't sure about me? I just want to remind you that you said that. So Wade Taylor just stuck it to me. This is, again, I know we don't like saying a moral victory, whatever, but you know, what else can you ask for a team that's not fully healthy? I mean, yeah. I love Houston. I know you picked Texas A&M in this game. I actually had a pretty good week. The only game I got wrong was Dayton and Cincinnati, but I think we were on our way down, and I kind of had this game pulled up because we were on our way down to go to that Dayton Cincinnati game. So, but yeah, I still think this is not a. Obviously, Texas A&M would love this win, but it's not a bad result, so to speak.
No, not at all. I'm still high on Texas A&M. If they do slide in the tournament, this is still a team I think I will pick to go to maybe the Sweet 16 and do pretty well. I think the guard play will help them, assuming they're 100% healthy. We'll see if they get healthy by that time, but that could be big. And I am still big on Houston too. I do like them. I've talked about Jamal Shed being a player I just think understands the game and is able to run an offense very well. But that lack of depth is concerning now. We'll see how they do. Big 12 play, different type of situation going into conference play for them as well. Next game up, Greg, we have Purdue beating Arizona. Now, this is a game that I think shocked me a little bit because Purdue's guards handled things well. If you look at just the stat sheet, you know, Braden Smith, 4 turnovers, just 2 assists on the game, right? But overall, they still handled the pressure very well. When you get 22 points out of Edey, 26 points out of Braden Smith, and 27 points out of Fletcher Lawyer, that's tough to beat. And they have all these other guys, they just rotate in and out of the lineup. They have that depth. So Purdue is very much scary. And they showed out. Now Arizona, not a terrible game. I think they had Boswell did not shoot well. Caleb Love tried to pick up the slack. He didn't have a terribly inefficient game. He was 9 of 19 for 29 points, seven free throws helping out in that regard too. But I still like them. We hate being this team, these people that always say we like both sides or whatever. But this game was a virtual home game for Purdue. It was in Indy, traveled all the way there. You got to go up against Zach Edey, who's the most dominant player in the sport, and they still kept it pretty close. And I think a rematch on a neutral floor, it could go the other way.
Yeah, I like what both of these teams have. There's good pieces, and yes, Joe, Caleb Love is a good basketball player. Mea culpa. I know I wasn't. It looks like it's working out for him. He's you said still pretty efficient. 9 of 19 is almost 50% from the field.
Yeah.
I would be willing to bet without looking that he maybe had 1 or 2 games last year or any of his year at Carolina that he shot that well. You had made a comment last week when we talked about him that he was only shooting I can't remember if you were talking about his 3-point percentage or what it was, but 4 of 9, I would take that from literally anyone. Even if he takes another one and he misses it, that's 4 for 10. That's 40%. I'll take any 40% 3-point shooter on my team. Absolutely.
Oh yeah.
There's a lot to like there. Keshad Johnson had a good game. Come on, I mean, Larson didn't have a particularly good. There is a lot of pieces, and I told you when I saw earlier in the year, I saw Kylan Boswell play. I really liked what I saw from him. He didn't have his best game, but there's plenty to like there. Purdue, you said it. I mean, we've seen good games from Edey. We've seen good games from Lawyer and Smith. Lance Jones has had a few really good games. Some of these guys off the bench, Heidi and Colvin, I know had one huge game. These are when we talk about complete teams that have depth, teams that can withstand a guy not having his best game. This is that we're looking at. Again, you want to say a moral victory is 2 elite teams playing each other and only one of them wins. And that's it. Trey Kaufman-Renn, I feel like there was a lot of billing on him in the preseason. I haven't watched every Purdue game, but I don't feel like he's been starting lineup potential, but I don't know where else Matt Painter would want to go with that. I mean, it's a nice piece to have, but this was just a good game. It's not going to hurt either team's resume. More of these games need to be played because you lose it. It doesn't really hurt you. You win it. It looks great. I mean, there's absolutely a world where both of these teams are one seeds, in March. I mean, between them and UConn, I mean, there's probably 3 of our 1 seeds already that we're looking at, and maybe just looking for one more. Maybe it'll be Kansas. I don't know, but this is good for both sides. You can't argue with me either way. I know this is, but I mean, it was going to come at some point. I didn't really think that anyone was going undefeated, especially when we see how much UConn's rolling and they already lost the game. So it's just one of those years where, it's nobody's going undefeated. There, even the juggernauts aren't invincible. But I like both of these teams going forward.
Yeah, I do too. I think it's possible Final Four teams, possible national champions. Both those teams fit in that category that we haven't eliminated them. They can still be a very good team. That's something to note as we go on through the season. Very good matchup. Good to play these games while you have the chance early in the season to really get a measuring stick of how your team was. And I think both teams turned out being okay. And this is the beauty of college basketball. Yes, the regular season may not matter as much as other sports, but play these tough games because in the end they won't really hurt you that much if you lose them. So good for both teams for scheduling this one. Let's go to the CBS Sports Classic. We have Kentucky beating North Carolina 87-83. Now Kentucky looked like they had control of this game earlier. They kind of took their foot off the gas and then held on at the end. A big performance from RJ Davis. He has 4 straight games of at least 26 points. That's going to help out a ton for North Carolina down the stretch. But really, I was impressed with Kentucky. I talked about how I liked what different players on the team brought to the team. We had Reed Shepherd hitting threes. We had DJ Wagner finishing at the hole and even pulling up in clutch moments. That helped. And we also had Rob Dillingham did not shoot efficiently. 1 of 6 from 3. I think 6 for 16 overall on the day. And he made some of the biggest plays of the day just because a lot of times the ball would stop and he was the one who could create shots. So that all happened. Aaron Bradshaw outplayed Armando Bacot. and they got the win. This Kentucky team, I think, is pretty scary. We're still kind of, for me, it's still trying to figure out this North Carolina team. I would have liked to see a better performance from Elliot Cadeau, but they're still going to be fine. I think Kentucky. I just came away impressed with their poise in this big matchup. Just ups and downs, ebbs and flows of the game, but they stuck with it and got the win.
Yeah, I do like this win for Kentucky. We've obviously seen them stumble a little bit, in the past couple weeks between UNCW and coming close with St. Joe's, and it called into their win over Miami has been called into question because Miami's been dropping some games. So I like this win from the Kentucky side. I'm with you on the Carolina side. I unfortunately was at the UC Dayton game, which we're going to talk about here in a second. So I did not have the chance to actually watch this live. I was with my brother-in-law, Cameron, who's a big UK fan, and service at Heritage Bank Arena is terrible. So we weren't able to actually physically pull up the video of the game. We were watching a game cast, like, box score type thing. So hanging on every thread of what was going to come through next. But yeah, I mean, it's a good win for Kentucky. We still have obviously questions about Carolina, but I'm going to pick them. We'll see in a little bit. They got a game come up this week, another chance to prove something here. But I do like that Kentucky last couple of weeks, just not anyone's maybe started to look a little funky, with just some of the way that those other teams have performed. So it's a good win for them.
I agree. Good win for them. We'll see if they can keep it rolling. They do have some bigger games coming up down the stretch, especially as they head into SEC play, but also still have Gonzaga during SEC play. So a lot of big games left for them. Greg, let's get to that Dayton and Cincinnati game. I was unable to watch a lot of this game, obviously with the Kentucky game going on, but Dayton gets the win here. It looks like from the outside perspective, they didn't have too much trouble with it. Saw a lot of powder blue in the stadium. What was your take from watching it live?
Yeah, I'm not going to say it felt like a home game because there was definitely a big UC presence. So the game was at Heritage Bank Arena in Cincinnati. There was definitely a lot of light blue. Dayton wore what they call their chapel blue. It's their baby blue light uniforms. The place was loud. I one of the things that Twitter, just the ruckus that I just said, this is what you don't get in an NBA game. This game was good for both teams. Like, just this is a game that should be played. I've said this off air a lot, but it still confuses me as to why Xavier won't schedule Dayton. I just this is a game that you can get classified as a road or a neutral game, and you only got to travel maybe 45 minutes. That's, for me, that's another rant that I've said it many places. I'd like to say it here for the first time. I don't know why you wouldn't schedule Dayton. So that's my soapbox for the day. But it was a fun play, icy, but towards the end, I mean, it was a double digit. It was you knew with a couple minutes to go what the result was going to be, and it was just bleeding clock at that point. But ask my wife, any Dayton team, you're always worried that when a team starts to string together a couple of buckets, you're just like any Cincinnati sports fan. Of course, it's Dayton, but it's, oh, here we go again. How are we going to blow this one? So, but they capped off the win. It's a good win for Dayton. Obviously, goes as a neutral court games. The game was not played at Fifth Third Arena at UC's arena. It was played at Heritage Bank, so it's a neutral. I believe that's right. It's got to be scheduled as it has to be classed as a neutral court for them, right?
Correct. Yep.
Like, I don't know when Gonzaga plays at that other arena. Do those get because I know they have the kennel and they have those get classed as neutral, correct?
Correct. They do. Yes.
Okay. Well, it's I mean, it's a good win for Dayton. So
definitely a good win for them. We'll see if they can keep things rolling. Moving on, Cincinnati may be showing that their early season schedule wasn't very tough. We're finding out more about them. I too would like both schools to schedule. I don't know what the holdup is there from a Xavier perspective or a Dayton perspective. I don't know who's negotiating, what's all going on. If the schools just hate each other too much that they don't even want to talk about it, I don't know. I mean, it's but whether it's a home and home, whether it's neutral, I have no idea. I would feel like Dayton would come down and play Xavier at US Bank too because it would probably get a decent number of fans from both sides, just like you saw with Dayton and Cincinnati. So hopefully things get figured out for the future. But for right now, Dayton looks like they're trending upwards heading into the A10 season. Cincinnati looks like they might have a tougher time with the Big 12 schedule. On Sunday, we had Auburn beating USC. Bronny James was a hit attraction according to Twitter, but really Auburn gets up for their basketball games in a different way now. They score 91 points. Holloway had 15 points, 6 assists. That's a big thing for Auburn. And USC's, I mean, we talked about their issues of maybe having to struggle to make the tournament, Greg. They're 5-5 right now, not looking great. I know the Pac-12 is something they can maybe pick up some momentum while they're in it, but they have to figure this thing out quick. They have too much talent on the roster to not make the tournament.
Yeah, I agree with that. I had this on our slate of pick games last week just because it was the first opportunity that anyone would have had to actually see Bronny James playing a game. A couple of buckets, good for him. I really, in my mind, I didn't really have any doubt, and that I guess says a lot more about USC. But I have loved what I've seen from Auburn. But when I was picking this game, I had zero doubt that Auburn was going to lose or was going to win this game. And that's telling for USC because, like you said, Joe, last week, this is a team that we want to be good because there's a lot going on. There's the top recruit in college basketball plays on this USC team. Boogie Ellis is good. I mean, there's Bronny. There's a lot of talent on this team, and it's not coming together right now. We've, maybe they've already shown us what they are, but one of the things I had said, 10-8 or 8-7 guy, maybe that's enough to push them over the edge. But right now, they still look like the same team that we saw a couple of weeks ago. So they kind of schedule is going to be Pac-12, but I mean that means they're going to get to play Arizona, they're going to get to play Colorado, they're going to get to play UCLA. Like there's going to be games that are noteworthy, but they're going to have to win a lot. I mean, this is, I think, going to be a lot, Joe, like we kind of talked about with Michigan State. I mean, I don't know if it's an 18 or a 20 game schedule, but I mean, we're probably going to have to be looking at a team that goes, 14-4 or 15-5 or whatever it is. They may be able to they don't have any terrible losses. They may be able to get away with, I know they had the UC Irvine loss. They may be able to get away with something like, I don't know if, first of all, I don't know if you have off the top of your head if they play 18 or 20 game schedule, but they may be able to get away with like a 12-6 if it's like the right combination. They beat Arizona, on the road, that kind of win. It's going to depend on it, but this is a team that I mean would be a crying shame not to have in the tournament. It just almost kind of reminds me of when Oklahoma State was going through all that stuff, and it was obviously a completely different situation. But when they had Cade Cunningham and everybody's like crying for this guy, we want him on the biggest stage in the tournament. And like, it's like, are they going to get, sanctions or whatever, or aren't they? And this is different. This is on the court stuff that would be what would keep them from being in the tournament. But, we'll just have to see. And you've already said it. I mean, there's some good teams in the Pac-12 this year, and it's, unfortunately, what looks like the last year for Pac-12 basketball as we know it. I'm sure Bill Walton somewhere is crying and upset as he should be. We all are. So, but just would like to see them put it together, just for the story that would be, getting to see them in the tournament.
I would too. I want to see them in the tournament. I want to see Bronny James, Boogie Ellis, and Isaiah Collier. I think that'd be fun to have going into the NCAA tournament, and just storylines galore. But good for Auburn. They've been solid program over the last several years with Bruce Pearl, and I think it's worth noting that they had maybe not the highest expectations this year, but I think they can bounce back and do okay. The last game we're going to recap, Greg. Nebraska beats Kansas State. They win 62-46. To me, this is good news for Nebraska. We talked about maybe they weren't for real after their good start to the season. And then Kansas State, I think, has a million different things going on with this program right now. Naquan Tomlin ends up getting dismissed from the university. He's now going to be joining Memphis. They've asked Jerome Tang how he felt about it, and he just said basically, "I'm happy to be doing this for a living," which is a great answer. Like, you should be happy to be doing this, but it also is a weird situation that maybe was handled a little bit more oddly than other universities from the outside looking in. So for Kansas State, I'm not sure what the future looks like for this year. I still think Jerome Tang will do a good job, but a big win for Nebraska to get this on the road.
Yeah, I just put this on our docket just because this is a Nebraska team that we obviously kind of said, all right, they look pretty fraudy, pretty fraudulent after they got smacked by Creighton. The reason I put this on there just to touch on is because this is a win that with Kansas State going into the Big 12 schedule, this is probably going to carry some weight. Even if Kansas State is a subpar Big 12 team, right now they're sitting at 76th in the net. I can't imagine that if they're a 500-ish team, which is still a lot to ask for in the Big 12, but that number is just going to go up. This eventually could be a quad one win for them, and I would imagine it may turn into that, even if Kansas State again is just a subpar Big 12 team. But that league is just so packed, it's going to look good. So, this is a team that, there's again, I watched them at the Creighton game, and I was like, all right, well then they go and this week they beat Michigan State, who we just saw demolish Baylor. So that's another win that they're going to have under their belt. So they are rooting for Michigan State to put things together. They would love to see that. I don't know, man. I mean, there could be something in this resume. It kind of stinks they lost to Minnesota. I don't really. I know that was a road loss, but I don't think they're all that good. The Creighton score more than anything is what scares me. But I just thought they were worth mentioning just because of those ties. Okay, well this week they beat. They not only beat Kansas State, a win that's probably going to carry some water, but they also beat Michigan State, a team that, everything a lot of people are hoping, kind of figure it out, and that would also be good for them. So just a team worth keeping an eye on more than anything. Not really anything too in-depth to say about them, but hopefully the resume, for them and Hoiberg out there, there's, hoping that things come together.
That would be good. A good win for them. And again, we're just going to be tracking Kansas State the rest of the year because I think it's just a fascinating story what's going on. First of all, rebuilding the roster after the Final Four run, but even the Naquan Tomlin situation and everything else. We'll see how that all goes. Let's get to our picks for the week. Now, again, just a reminder, there's not many huge games in the couple of weeks in the middle of December that we're going through here. So we're going to pick the ones that we think are pretty big. There's only about 4 we're going to pick here. Let's get it started. We have Marquette and Providence. This one's on December 19th, 8:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. It's at Providence. Greg, who are you taking?
I'm going to take Marquette, but this is definitely one I looked at. I know Marquette's they've had their struggles. We know what we like from that Providence team. It's at Providence. I'm going to, with hesitation, take Marquette. I do, again, this Providence team, I've not personally seen a ton of them, but we know there's a lot of good players out there and first year head coach stepping in for Ed Cooley. We got Kim English out there. So just don't know how things might go for them in the, once the Big East schedule picks up, which I believe this is the first Big East game for both of these teams, but got it on here because it's definitely one of the better games of this week. Again, just like Joe said, it's not a loaded slate. So I'm going with Marquette. Final answer. Joe, what are you thinking?
I'm going Marquette too. I think if you would have asked me a couple weeks ago, I would have gone Providence, but not all the results have gone their way this year. I think they're still figuring themselves out. Still think they'll be a team that maybe pushes in the top 3 or so of the Big East, and you would think that maybe they'd win these games at home, but I want to see more from Bryce Hopkins. I'll be honest. I was very high on him. He did not show up as much as I would have liked in the Oklahoma game, so let's see more out of him. And Marquette seems to have something down here. I think Tyler Kolek in this year is doing pretty well, and I've mentioned how much I like Cam Jones and his fit with Kolek. I think that's really big. Next game up on December 20th, 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, Madison Square Garden. We have Baylor and Duke.
I am going to take Duke. Joe, you already kind of touched on some concerns with Baylor, but here's what the resume looks like right now. They have a win over Auburn. We both, Auburn's, not a top 25 team in terms of the AP poll right now, but I've at least said that when I watched that Baylor Auburn game that I thought Auburn was better than, or at least looked like they belonged in that game. They lost to Michigan State. They've got a win over Florida, and then like Seton Hall and Oregon State, and then that's it. So this team's not had a lot to show us yet. Hopefully that Michigan State game wasn't, kind of showing us what's yet to come. Just I did like what I saw in that Baylor Auburn game, but and I know we have our concerns with Duke. Madison Square Garden is basically Cameron North. So with that in mind and knowing Baylor's coming off a pretty bad loss, I'm going to pick Duke. Joe, what are you thinking?
I'm going to pick Duke too. You had asked me a week ago to take in Baylor. I think that Duke's problems were a bit more apparent, but now that we have seen Baylor play Michigan State, I will go Duke. I think they do have enough. Again, similar issues maybe Kansas, where it's a lot of Filipowski, it's a little bit of Roach, and then you're finding who else can step up in any given day, and that's not the greatest recipe for success. I think they can get the job done against Baylor, whose defense is just very bad. So I'll go Duke here too. Next game up, we have Oklahoma and North Carolina. This one is in Charlotte. It is December 20th at 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time.
I am fascinated with this game, Joe, because I talked about this Oklahoma team in the past couple pods and just how they're still winning games. And maybe it's that preseason bias that I'm hanging on to, but I absolutely can't wait to see this game because I feel like I have a good hold on what Carolina is. And I'm going to pick Carolina in this game, but I'm interested to see, what we get out of Oklahoma in this game. Because I feel like this is their biggest test. So, I am just going to be looking from the Oklahoma side to see, okay, what's actually here? What might this team be come tournament time?
Yeah, I think you're right. This is the biggest test for them so far. They'll have bigger ones when they go into Big 12 play, but I'm going to go North Carolina as well. I did think they played an okay game against Kentucky. It wasn't a perfect game. R.J. Davis, I think, bailed him out, but he's on fire right now, so I'm going to stick with that hot hand. And I think that Oklahoma may not have all the players to match up with North Carolina. Yes, they did beat Providence. That was a big win. But I think North Carolina is just at a little bit of a different level here, so I will take the Tar Heels. Again, in a virtual home game, Charlotte's not very close to Chapel Hill, but it's close enough that it's a short drive, so we'll take them in that home game. The last one we'll take of the week, we have Florida Atlantic at Arizona. This one's on Saturday, December 23rd, 3 p.m. in Las Vegas. A good, fun matchup that was scheduled in the non-conference here, Greg.
Yeah, I just want to take a minute and give props to FAU after a Final Four appearance last year. Their non-conference schedule includes Texas A&M, Illinois, Arizona, Virginia Tech, Butler, who looks like they might be decent this year. Props to them. They're going up a conference, FAU is this year, going into the American. So it's not like they're going to have, as much of a cakewalk as they probably did last year in CUSA, although there were definitely some decent teams in CUSA. So I just like to see coaches schedule like this, and I guess if we're going to say that, props to the teams that chose to play them, because I can't remember the timing of when